LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer CNN Republican Debate Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the top 14 clips from last night's Miami debate on CNN. Excuse me for that little glitch right at the beginning. This is the last debate before what they call Mini Super Tuesday next Tuesday, where Florida will be a winner-take-all state for the Republicans, and Ohio will be a winner-take-all state for the Republicans. There are also some other big states up, I think Missouri and Illinois, if I think I have those correctly. I know those are Democratic primaries coming up. So I picked out the top 14 clips from last night's debate. If you look down in the video description, I've described each of those clips, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, I should have put time indexes down there so that you can skip to the topics that most interest you. What was most interesting to me about this debate was that it was almost a civil debate after the last Republican debate, which I covered on Fox News, which, or even worse, the previous one, total chaos debate. They seem to really have muted the personal attacks, and especially Donald Trump is much more muted. You'll see both Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Marco Rubio have very nuanced, very light attacks on Donald Trump, and I'm going to go through each of the clips that I think was most important, and I'll add my media criticism and political analysis to make this a fair use video, even though it looks like it may not be monetized because I put too much stuff about terrorism and ISIS in the video description, so it may be too sensitive for YouTube to be advertiser friendly. The video I did yesterday also not monetized. That's because of a copyright claim from Univision. So if you want to help me keep making these videos without any monetization, there's also a link down in the video description to my Patreon page. But let me get to the clips. I'm going to start off with a back and forth between first Donald Trump and then Senator Marco Rubio talking about Social Security, which is, a really serious topic. And you'll see along the way, Dana Bash tries to bait Marco Rubio into taking attack on Donald Trump and how his numbers don't add up. And Marco Rubio just will attack the numbers and not Donald Trump himself over in this clip.
Retirement age, and you also don't want to cut benefits even for wealthier Americans. But according to the Social Security Administration, unless adjustments are made, Social Security is projected to run out of money within 20 years. So specifically, what would you do to stop that from happening?
Well, first of all, I want you to understand that the Democrats, and I've watched them very intensely, even though it's a very, very boring thing to watch, that the Democrats are doing nothing with Social Security. They're leaving it the way it is. In fact, they want to increase it. They want to actually give more. And that's what we're up against. And whether we like it or not, that is what we're up against. I will do everything within my power not to touch Social Security, to leave it the way it is, to make this country rich again, to bring back our jobs, to get rid of deficits, to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, which is rampant in this country, rampant, totally rampant. And it's my absolute intention to leave Social Security the way it is, not increase the age, and to leave it as is. You have 22 years. You have a long time to go. It's not long in terms of what we're talking about, but it's still a long time to go. And I want to leave Social Security as is. I want to make our country rich again so we can afford it. I want to bring back our jobs. I want to do things that will that will bring back GDP. I mean, as an example, GDP was zero, essentially, for the last 2 quarters. If that ever happened in China, you would have had a depression like nobody's ever seen before. They go down to 7%, 8%, and it's a national tragedy. We're at zero. We're not doing anything. We've lost our jobs. We've lost everything. We're losing everything. Our jobs are gone. Our businesses are being taken out of the country. I want to make America great again, and I want to leave Social Security as is. We're going to get rid of waste, fraud, abuse, and bring back business.
Senator Rubio, I know you want to get in. Hang on one second. I just want to follow up with Mr. Trump. You're talking about waste, fraud, and abuse, but an independent bipartisan organization, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, says improper payments, like you're talking about, that would only save about $3 billion. But it would take $150 billion to make Social Security solvent. So how would you find that under $147 billion?
Because they don't cover most of the subjects. We're the policemen of the world. We take care of the entire world. We're going to have a stronger military, much stronger. Our military is depleted, but we take care of Germany. We take care of Saudi Arabia. We take care of Japan. We take care of South Korea. Every time this maniac from North Korea does anything, we immediately send our ships. We get virtually nothing. We have 28,000 soldiers on the line, on the border between North and South Korea. We have so many places. Saudi Arabia was making $1 billion a day, and we were getting virtually nothing to protect them. We are going to be in a different world. We're going to negotiate real deals now, and we're going to bring the wealth back to our country. We owe $19 trillion. We're going to bring wealth back to our country.
Senator Rubio, will that be enough to save Social Security?
No, and I think you've outlined why. The numbers don't add up. You know, when I ran for the Senate in 2010, I came out one day and said we're going to have to make changes to Social Security, and everyone said that's the end of your campaign. In Florida, you can't talk about that. But people know that it's the truth here in Florida. Fraud is not enough. Certainly, let's wipe out the fraud, but as you said, it won't add up. You already gave those numbers. The second point is on foreign aid. I hear that all the time as well. I'm against any sort of wasting of money on foreign aid, but it's less than 1% of our federal budget. The numbers don't add up. The bottom line is we can't just continue to tiptoe around this and throw out things like I'm going to get it for fraud and abuse. Let's get rid of fraud. Let's get rid of abuse. Let's be more careful about how we spend foreign aid. But you still have hundreds of billions of dollars of deficit that you're going to have to make up. And here's the thing. If we do not do it, we will have a debt crisis, not to mention a crisis in Social Security and Medicare. Both parties have taken far too long to deal with it. It is one of the major issues confronting America. It's barely been asked in any of these debates. And we better deal with it, or we're going to have to explain to our children why they inherited this disaster.
Mr. Trump, Senator Rubio says your numbers don't add up. What's your response? Senator Rubio says that your numbers don't add up. What's your response, Mr. Trump?
Well, I don't know if you're saying that. Look, I'm just saying very simply, we have a country that I've never seen anything like it. I've been going over budgets and looking at budgets. We don't bid things out. We don't bid out, as an example, the drug industry, pharmaceutical industry. They don't go out to bid. They just pay almost as if you're walking to a drugstore. That's what they're paying. And the reason is they have a fantastic lobby. They take care of all of the senators, the congressmen. They have great power, and they don't bid out. The military is never properly bid. When we go out to military bids, it's not properly bid. And the people that really sell us the product are oftentimes the product we don't want, only because that particular company has political juice, okay? I'm self-funding my campaign. Nobody's going to be taking care of me. I don't want anybody's money. I will tell you something. We're going to go out to bid in virtually every different facet of our government. We're going to save a fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Senator Cruz.
So you saw first there that Senator Marco Rubio would not attack Donald Trump, would only attack his numbers, that his numbers wouldn't add up, as Dana Bash had already said. And you saw the moderator even tried to get Donald Trump to attack Marco Rubio for saying his numbers didn't add up. And Donald Trump started by saying, well, I'm not sure he really said that, which, I mean, that doesn't seem to be the Donald Trump I've seen from the previous debates. He's like taking a real chill pill for this debate, or you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But that's certainly not the only example of the debaters definitely having made some decision to be a lot more civil in this debate. In this next clip, you'll see Senator Ted Cruz attacks the idea of those who say they can solve government problems through cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, which is what you just saw Donald Trump say in that last clip. But he attributes it to Hillary Clinton, and it takes, again, the moderator, Dana Bash, to point out that he's equating Donald Trump with Hillary Clinton. And when Donald Trump responds to this, more subtle attack from Senator Ted Cruz, he does do some light policy attacks on ethanol and on amnesty, but you won't hear the words "lying Ted" come from Donald Trump's mouth in this back and forth between him and Ted Cruz on a similar subject, but just more abstract than the last one with Marco Rubio over here.
Lots of challenges in the world, but the answer can't just be wave a magic wand and say, problem, go away. You have to understand the problems. You have to have real solutions. It's like government spending. It is very easy. Hillary Clinton says she'll cut waste, fraud, and abuse. If only we had smarter people in Washington, that would fix the problem. You know what? That is the statement of a liberal who doesn't understand government is the problem. Here's my philosophy. The less government, the more freedom. The fewer bureaucrats, the more prosperity. And there are bureaucrats in Washington right now who are killing jobs, and I'll tell you, I know who they are. I will find them, and I will fire them.
Did you just compare Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton on this issue?
I will let Donald speak for himself, but I will say there is a reason in my campaign I've laid out a very, very specific spending cut plan. $500 billion. I've specified 5 major agencies that I would eliminate, 25 programs. And Dana, you know why political candidates don't do that? Because when you do that, the lobbyists attack you. When you specify the programs you would eliminate, then you get attacked. Let's take, for example, back in Iowa, the first primary. When I went to Iowa and campaigned against ethanol mandates, everyone said that was political suicide. You can't take on ethanol in Iowa. And my opponents on this stage not only didn't do the same, they attacked me and even promised to expand corporate welfare. If we're going to stop bankrupting our kids and grandkids, you've got to be willing to take on the lobbyists, which means not just some fanciful waste, fraud, and abuse, but specifying these are the programs I will eliminate so that we can take care of the hardworking taxpayers.
Mr. Trump, would you like to respond?
Yeah. If you look back to Iowa, Ted did change his view and his stance on ethanol quite a bit. He did, and at the end, not full on, but he did change his view in the hopes of maybe doing well. And you know, I think everybody knows that. It was a front page story all over the place, and he did make a change.
Senator Cruz?
Listen, if you're fed up with Washington, the question you ought to be asking is who's willing to take on Washington? It's easy to have language, I'm fed up with the corruption in Washington. But if you have a candidate who has been funding liberal Democrats and funding the Washington establishment, it's very hard to imagine how suddenly this candidate is going to take on Washington. When I stood up and led the fight against Obamacare, Washington was furious and attacked me, but I did it because I was honoring my commitment to the hardworking men and women of this country who are losing their jobs because of Obamacare. When I led the fight against amnesty, it's because I was standing with the people against Washington. And if you want to tell people you're going to stand against Washington, the question we should ask is, when have you ever stood up to the lobbyists in Washington?
Okay, Mr. Trump, I'll let you respond because he mentioned you, but then I'm going to move on to Governor Kasich. Go ahead.
Well, that's fine. First of all, Ted was in favor of amnesty, so there's no question about that. And Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Sheriff Joe Arpaio recently endorsed me, and there's nobody tougher on the borders than Sheriff Joe. And Jeff Sessions, one of the most respected senators in Washington, an incredible man, also endorsed me. And there's nobody that knows more about the borders than Senator Jeff Sessions. I would say this: we're all in this together. We're going to come up with solutions. We're going to find the answers to things. And so far, I cannot believe how civil it's been up here.
Governor Kasich, let's get...
Even Donald Trump can't believe how civil it's been. And you saw right there that Ted Cruz, his only really subtle attack on Donald Trump was in like a comparison to Hillary Clinton, using the words waste, fraud, and abuse that it took the moderator, Dana Bash, to bring up. And then Donald Trump, I mean, he did attack Ted Cruz on policies, on ethanol and on amnesty, but there was no Lion Ted. Listening to Donald Trump there, he was talking slower. He was talking more softly. It's almost like he's a different candidate in this debate. Maybe this is his big pivot towards the general election. And I'm going to show another example of those same two candidates, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, discussing policy in a civil way without really attacking each other, even though they have some opportunity in the exchange. You'll see this is on the issue of trade and tariffs, and you'll see Ted Cruz attacks Donald Trump's policies, but doesn't attack Donald Trump, who basically returns the favor in what is a civil debate, believe it or not, from the Republicans over in this clip.
Donald is right, for example. He was just talking about international trade. He's right about the problems, but his solutions don't work. So, for example, his solution on international trade, he proposed earlier a 45% tariff on foreign goods. Now, he backed away from that immediately, and he may come back with a different number tonight. I don't know where he'll be tonight. But I'll tell you what happens. You know, we've seen prior presidential candidates who proposed massive tariffs. You know, Smoot-Hawley led to the Great Depression. And the effect of a 45% tariff would be when you go to the store, when you go to Walmart, when you're shopping for your kids, the prices you pay go up 45%. But not only that, when you put those in place, because a tariff is a tax on you, the American people, but the response of that is that the countries we trade with put in their own tariffs. A much better solution that works is the tax plan I've laid out, which would enable our exports to be tax-free, would tax our imports, would not raise prices for Americans, and would not result in reciprocal tariffs.
Thank you.
Fix the problem, and that's what's missing from
Senator.
what Donald says.
Mr. Trump, will give you a chance to respond.
The 45% tax is a threat. It was not a tax, it was a threat. It will be a tax if they don't behave. Take China as an example. I have many friends, great manufacturers, they want to go into China. They can't. China won't let them. We talk about free trade. It's not free trade. It's stupid trade. China dumps everything that they have over here. No tax, no nothing, no problems, no curfews, no anything. We can't get into China. I have the best people, manufacturers. They can't get in. When they get in, they have to pay a tremendous tax. The 45% is a threat that if they don't behave, if they don't follow the rules and the regulations so that we can have it equal on both sides, we will tax you. It doesn't have to be 45, it could be less, but it has to be something because our country and our trade and our deals and most importantly, our jobs are going to hell.
Senator Cruz.
Jake, let me be clear what Donald just said. He said that 45% tax is a threat, and mind you, you are paying the tax. It's not China that pays the tax. It's you, the working men and women. So ask yourself at home, how is this helping you? If your wages have been stagnant for 20 years, if you can't pay the bills, how does it help you to have a president come and say, I'm going to put a 45% tax on diapers when you buy diapers, on automobiles when you buy automobiles, on clothing when you buy clothing? That hurts you. It's why we've got to get beyond rhetoric of China bad and actually get to how do you solve the problem, because this solution would hurt jobs and hurt hardworking taxpayers in America.
Okay.
Jake, I have
Trump.
to say, honestly, it's just the opposite. What will happen if they don't behave? We will put on a tax of some amount, and it could be a large amount, and we will start building those factories and those plants. Instead of in China, we'll build them here, and people will buy product from here rather than buying it through China, where we're being ripped off, and we have a $505 billion trade deficit right now. So we'll build our factories here, and we'll make our own products, and that's the way it should be done. And the way we've been doing it for the last long period of time is our country is in serious, serious trouble. It's a bubble, and it's going to explode. Believe
All right,
me.
we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back.
So you saw, again, sort of a really soft critique of Donald Trump from Senator Ted Cruz there with his whole, you can't just say China bad. And you saw Donald Trump respond with his disagreement and his talking points, but no attack on Ted Cruz. Once again, a civil debate on the issue of trade. And in this next clip, I want to show how Jake Tapper tried to get things, more heated, I guess, by bringing up one of Donald Trump's recent incendiary quotes where he basically said, I think the quote was, "Islam hates us." And you'll see Jake Tapper ask him about that. Do you mean like all 1.6 billion Muslims? And Donald Trump pretty much sticks to his guns, so to speak. I hope they're not real guns, but sticks to his guns on the quote. And then I'll show how both Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz disagree with him, but they do it civilly again. And I think Marco Rubio gets the best of the disagreement and one of the best lines of the debate, which I will explain after you watch that back and forth, starting with Donald Trump, then Rubio and Cruz in this clip.
Mr. Trump, let me start with you. Last night you told CNN, quote, "Islam hates us." Did you mean all 1.6 billion Muslims?
I mean a lot of them. I mean a lot of them.
Do you want to clarify the comment at all?
Well, you know, I've been watching the debate today, and they're talking about radical Islamic terrorism or radical Islam, but I will tell you there's something going on that maybe you don't know about, and maybe a lot of other people don't know about, but there's tremendous hatred, and I will stick with exactly what I said to Anderson Cooper.
Senator Rubio, your supporter, Republican Senator Jeff Sessions, said in response to Mr. Trump's comment last night, I'm sorry, Senator Jeff Flake, I apologize. Your supporters, Republican Senator Jeff Flake, said in response to that comment, Republicans are better than this. Do you agree?
Well, let me say, I know that a lot of people find appeal in the things Donald says because he says what people wish they could say. The problem is presidents can't just say anything they want. It has consequences here and around the world. And so let me give you one. 2 days ago, I met this extraordinary couple who are on furlough because they're missionaries in Bangladesh. It's a very tough place to be a missionary. It's Muslim. And their safety and security very much relies upon friendly Muslims that live alongside them, that may not convert but protect them and certainly look out for them. And their mission field really are Muslims that are looking to convert to Christianity as well. And they tell me that today they have a very hostile environment in which to operate in because the news is coming out that in America, leading political figures are saying that America doesn't like Muslims. So this has a real impact. There is no doubt that radical Islam is a danger in the world. I can also tell you that if you go to any national cemetery, especially Arlington, you're going to see crescent moons there. If you go anywhere in the world, you're going to see American men and women serving us in uniform that are Muslims. And they love America. And as far as I know, no one on this stage has served in uniform in the United States military. Anyone out there that has the uniform of the United States on and is willing to die for this country is someone that loves America, no matter what their religious background may be.
Mr. Trump?
Marco talks about consequences. Well, we've had a lot of consequences, including airplanes flying into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and could have been the White House. There have been a lot of problems. Now, you can say what you want, and you can be politically correct if you want. I don't want to be so politically correct. I like to solve problems. We have a serious, serious problem of hate. There is tremendous hate. There is tremendous hate. Where large portions of a group of people, Islam, large portions want to use very, very harsh means. Let me go a step further. Women are treated horribly. You know that. You do know that. Women are treated horribly, and other things are happening that are very, very bad. Now, I will say this. There is tremendous hatred. The question was asked, what do you think? And I said, there is hatred. Now, it'd be very easy for me to say something differently, and everybody would say, oh, isn't that wonderful?
Mr. Trump,
we better solve the problem before it's too late.
Senator Rubio?
Here we go. See, I'm not interested in being politically correct. I'm not interested in being politically correct. I'm interested in being correct. And in order to be correct on this issue, here's the bottom line. We do work. There is Islam. Islam has a major problem on its hands. It has a significant percentage of its adherents, particularly in the Sunni faith, but also in the Shia, who have been radicalized and are willing to fly planes into a building and kill innocent people. There is no doubt about that. It is also true that if you look around the world at the challenges we face, we are going to have to work together with Muslims who are not radicals. We're going to have to work with the Jordanian kingdom. We're going to have to work with the Saudis. We're going to have to work with the Gulf kingdoms. We're going to have to work with the Egyptians to defeat, for example, ISIS. It will take a Sunni Arab movement to defeat them. And so I think you can be correct without needing to be politically correct. We are going to have to work with people in the Muslim faith, even as Islam itself faces a serious crisis within it of radicalization.
Senator. Governor Kasich?
Oh, I actually made a mistake when I introduced that clip. I said that I was going to compare what Marco Rubio said to something Ted Cruz said, and it would be in that clip. But actually, I was mistaking it for a different clip. And what I want to compare what Marco Rubio said there to what Governor John Kasich said, which is the next clip. I thought Marco Rubio did a good job of attacking the Donald Trump policy without attacking Donald Trump. The whole thing, that line about I don't want to be politically correct, I want to be correct, I thought was one of the best lines of the debate. And he had that image of the crescents on the gravestones in military cemeteries. And I don't know, he was trying to talk about, supporting our troops and trying to show that Donald Trump wasn't supporting our Muslim troops, which is kind of a good rhetorical device, I guess. And I thought that answer was better than the one you're about to see from Ohio Governor John Kasich, although he also tries to show, what passes for moderation in the Republican Party, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Do you think Islam hates us?
No, I don't. I think there is a sect of this radical Islam that is really, really serious and poses the greatest threat to us today. There isn't any question. And that's why the whole world has to work together to make sure that we don't have proliferation of these weapons of mass destruction. But look, I was there when and saw it when the Egyptian ambassador to the United States was in the Rose Garden, bringing the Arab Muslim world to work with us to repel Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. The fact is that if we're going to defeat ISIS, we're going to have these countries. And they are Egypt, and they are Saudi Arabia, and they are Jordan, and there are the Gulf states. And we're going to have in some way or another a rapprochement with Turkey. And I frankly think the Europeans went in the wrong direction when they rejected Turkey from joining into the economic sphere of Europe. The simple fact of the matter is a lot of these Muslim countries they can't believe the stuff they see out of people who have distorted their faith. Look, the people who represent radical Islam, they want to destroy everything that we're about and other Muslims who don't share their view. But at the end of the day, we got to bring the world together, the civilized world, and we all speak with one voice to make sure that people who sit on the fence understand what civilization is, and we represent it, and equality and hope for everybody.
Thank you, Governor Kasich. Mr.
I think Governor John Kasich of Ohio there had some good moments in the debate, yesterday. I really don't think he's going to be a factor, although he may still win Ohio, his home state, and that may give him some justification to go all the way to the convention to see if there's a contested convention and he can end up being the consensus candidate. But it's hard to see really how he has a path to the nomination, but he is sort of standing in there as the moderate. But somehow I think his moderate answer there wasn't quite as good as Senator Marco Rubio's answer, which wasn't really that moderate. I guess he's a moderate only when you compare him to Donald Trump, and Islam hates us. And speaking of Donald Trump being immoderate, I want to concentrate mostly on Donald Trump because I think he's most likely to be the Republican nominee, and then I have a bunch of Rubio and Cruz clips. I think there's only one other clip I have with John Kasich in it. Like I said, I'm making an editorial decision not to really concentrate on him because of his low chances of becoming the nominee. Because Donald Trump has such a high chance of being the Republican nominee, his answer to this next question is all the more disturbing. He's still kind of following up on his weird misstatement a week or so ago that he would do, waterboarding and worse, and that he would target the families of terrorists, which are both war crimes and illegal. And he's backed off on that. His new response on that is that he'll obey the law, but he wants to expand the law, and he uses what ISIS terrorists do to Americans as his standard for what Americans should be allowed to do to other people, which of course is in terms of ethics and morals doesn't seem to be a good choice to let the worst people in the world, the most horrible actors in the world, choose how low you're willing to go. And this is the clip where both Rubio and Cruz respond, and they both end up looking like moderates in comparison to Donald Trump, because they both say, of course not, we shouldn't target the terrorist families, but Donald Trump doesn't quite go that far over in this clip.
I want to ask you about something else you've said during the course of this campaign. You said that the U.S. has to, quote, take out the families of terrorists. When it was pointed out that targeting civilians is against the Geneva Conventions, you said, quote, so they can kill us, but we can't kill them? It is against federal, military, and international law to target civilians. So how will you order the military to target the families of suspected terrorists while also abiding by the law?
First of all, let me go back to the other just for a second. In large mosques in all over the Middle East, you have people chanting death to the USA. Now, that does not sound like a friendly act to me. As far as the families are concerned and as far as the law is concerned, we have a law. This all started with your question on waterboarding. We have a law that doesn't allow right now waterboarding. They have no laws, they have no rules, they have no regulations. They chop off heads, they drown 40, 50, 60 people at a time in big steel cages, pull them up an hour later, everyone dead, and we're working on a different set of parameters. Now, we have to obey the laws, okay? Have to obey the laws, but we have to expand those laws because we have to be able to fight on at least somewhat of an equal footing, or we will never, ever knock out ISIS and all of the others that are so bad. We better expand our laws, or we're being a bunch of suckers, and they are laughing at us. They are laughing at us, believe me.
Senator Rubio, would you, as president, pursue a policy of targeting the families of suspected terrorists?
No, of course not. And we don't have to in order to defeat terrorists. The way you defeat terrorists is pretty straightforward. It's difficult to do, but it has to be done. When I'm president of the United States, the best intelligence agencies in the world that right now have been hamstrung, they're going to be expanded, and the best intelligence agencies in the world are going to find terrorists. And then the best military in the world, which needs to be rebuilt because Barack Obama is gutting our military. He's going to leave us with the smallest army since the end of World War II, and the smallest Navy in a century, and the smallest Air Force we've ever had. We are going to rebuild that military, and that military is going to find the terrorists and destroy them. And if we capture any of these terrorists alive, they're not going to have the right to remain silent, and they're not going to go to a courtroom in Manhattan. They're going to go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and we will find out everything they know, and we'll do so legally.
Senator Cruz, you've talked about changing the rules of engagement in battle against ISIS. Would that include targeting the families of suspected terrorists?
No, of course not. We've never targeted innocent civilians, and we're not going to start now. But listen, Jake, I understand. People are scared, and for 7 years we faced terrorist attacks, and President Obama lectures Americans on Islamophobia. That is maddening. But the answer is not simply to yell, China bad, Muslims bad. You've got to understand the nature of the threats we're facing and how you deal with them. And yes, it is true, there are millions of radical Islamic terrorists who seek to kill us. We need a president commander-in-chief focused on fighting them. And I'll tell you frankly, one concern I have with Donald is that although his language is quite incendiary, when you look at his substantive policies on Iran, he has said that he would not rip up this Iranian nuclear deal. I think that's a mistake. The Ayatollah Khamenei wants nuclear weapons to murder us. I'll give you another example, dealing with radical Islamic terrorism. On Israel, Donald has said he wants to be neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. As president, I will not be neutral. And let me say, this week, a Texan, Taylor Force, he was an Eagle Scout, he was a West Point graduate, he was an Army veteran. He was murdered by a Palestinian terrorist this week in Israel. And I don't think we need a commander-in-chief who is neutral between the Palestinian terrorist and one of our strongest allies in the world, the nation of Israel.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
Now, that point that Senator Ted Cruz made there at the end about Donald Trump being neutral on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that's the subject of the next clip, and I'll get to that in just a sec. But I wanted to remark on that last clip first. You saw Senator Marco Rubio saying that he's going to send terrorists to Guantanamo, and even George W. Bush wanted to close Guantanamo. Now it's only Barack Obama who wants to close it, and that's kind of what I meant in terms of Senator Marco Rubio and even Senator Ted Cruz by saying, "Of course not." They both said, "Of course not. We're not going to target terrorist families in violation of the Geneva Convention." And that makes them like the moderates in the race compared to Donald Trump, who's saying he wants to, follow the law, but expand the law because we have to, do things as vicious and as savage as the most savage, vicious people on the planet because somehow that's going to help us. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, but you can let me know down in the comment section if you think that Donald Trump's policies or even Ted Cruz's or Marco Rubio's policies there make much sense. But like I said, I'm now going to move on to this Israeli-Palestinian conflict discussion, and that seems to make even less sense because Donald Trump said something a while back about how he wanted to be neutral on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because he wants to make a deal. And this used to be American policy, even amongst Republicans. For a long time, it was called like the honest broker policy. Even though Israel was our ally, we would be an honest broker in the negotiations. But You'll see both Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Marco Rubio attack Donald Trump and say that being neutral actually means being anti-Israel. And Marco Rubio even has like this whole argument that explains why you have to be against a deal if you want to be pro-Israel. And then the whole thing is based on questioning from right-wing radio talk show host Hugh Hewitt, who has definitely a very pro-Israel bias in his questioning. And I will discuss all that a little more after you watch. This is 5 minutes long because it's Hugh Hewitt and Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz all going back and forth on this one issue. And I will discuss it more after you watch it here.
I want to follow up on the quote that Senator Cruz used. You said you would want to be, quote, sort of a neutral guy. He did mention Taylor Force. He was a West Point graduate. He was a war hero. He was a Vanderbilt graduate student. He was killed in a Palestinian terror attack near Tel Aviv. Many others were killed. And the Israeli government says the Palestinian Authority is inciting this. Do you still want to stay neutral when the Palestinian Authority is inciting these attacks?
First of all, there's nobody on this stage that's more pro-Israel than I am. Okay? There's nobody. I am pro-Israel. I was the Grand Marshal, not so long ago, of the Israeli Day Parade down Fifth Avenue. I've made massive contributions to Israel. I have I have tremendous love for Israel. I happen to have a son-in-law and a daughter that are Jewish, okay? And 2 grandchildren that are Jewish. But I will tell you, I think if we're going to ever negotiate a peace settlement, which every Israeli wants, and I've spoken to the toughest and the sharpest, they all want peace, I think it would be much more helpful. I'm a negotiator. If I go in, I'll say I'm pro-Israel, and I've told that to everybody and anybody that would listen. But I would like to at least have the other side think I'm somewhat neutral as to them so that we can maybe get a deal done. Maybe we can get a deal. I think it's probably the toughest negotiation of all time, but maybe we can get a deal done.
Senator
As far
Cruz,
as, and by the way, just so you understand, as far as Iran, I would have never made that deal. I think it's maybe the worst deal I've ever seen. I think it's the worst deal I've ever seen negotiated. I will be so tough on them, and ultimately that deal will be broken unless they behave better than they've ever behaved in their lives, which is probably unlikely.
Senator
and that
Cruz
deal
and
will
Senator
be broken.
Rubio.
You know, we need a president who understands the national security interest of this country. The reason we are friends and allies with Israel is they are a liberal democratic country that share our values. They're our strongest ally in the region. We get billions in intelligence resources, billions in military resources. And the Palestinian Authority that Donald, along with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, say they want to treat neutrally the same as Israel. The Palestinian Authority is in a unity government with Hamas, a terrorist organization. They pay the families of these terrorists who murder people. And this is exactly the moral relativism Barack Obama has. And the answer is not scream all Muslims bad. Let me give you an example of a Muslim, for example, we ought to be standing with. President al-Sisi of Egypt, a president of a Muslim country who is targeting radical Islamic terrorists. He's hunting them down and stopping them. Our focus needs to be on keeping this country safe.
I want to go back to the Israeli government's assertion that the Palestinian Authority is inciting the convulsion of violence. Do you agree?
Well, that's undeniable. First of all, they've said they've encouraged people to do so. And you've seen the speeches of the Palestinian Authority president talking about how glorious this is that they're doing these sorts of things. But let me go back for a moment. The policy Donald has outlined, I don't know if he realizes, is an anti-Israeli policy. Maybe that's not your intent, but here's why it is an anti-Israeli policy. There is no peace deal possible with the Palestinians at this moment. There just isn't, because there's no one to negotiate with. The Palestinian Authority is not interested in a serious deal, and they are now in union with Hamas, an organization whose specific purpose is the destruction of the Jewish state. Every time that Israel has turned over territory of any kind, be it Gaza or now in Judea and Samaria, it is used as a launching pad to attack Israel. And that's what will happen again. These groups are not interested in a deal with Israel. What they are interested in is ultimately removing the Jewish state and occupying its entire territory. So maybe in 30 years the conditions will exist, but they do not exist now. And to have a president forcing the Israelis to the table is harmful to Israel and emboldens Israel's enemies.
Mr. Trump, a response, and we'll go to Governor Cook.
If I become president of the United States, one of the things that will be an absolute priority is, number one, protection of Israel, but also seeing if a deal can be made. The toughest deal, the toughest negotiation there probably is of any kind, no matter where you look, no matter how hard you look. But I would like to give it a shot. Very, very pro-Israel, nobody more pro-Israel, but I would love to give it a shot. And I have to tell you this, I have friends, Israelis, non-Israelis, people from New York City that happen to be Jewish and love Israel. And some are very tough people. Every single one of them, they know it's tough, but every single one of them wants to see if we could ever have peace in Israel. And some believe it's possible. It may not be, in which case we'll find out. But it would be a priority if I become president to see if I can do it.
Do you agree with the Israeli government that the Palestinian Authority...
And I cut it off there for a little bit of the clip, but what I thought was really amazing about that clip is it's Donald Trump who ends up being the moderate, because he's willing to say that he wants to be something like the old honest broker. I talked about that a little before I showed the clip, and that's what passes for a discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Republican Party. It's not that much better in the Democratic Party, but there, even saying you're going to try to broker a deal makes you anti-Israel for two of the three candidates, of the top three candidates for president in the Republican Party this year, which is pretty sad state of affairs, I think. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And as I said a little bit earlier, I'm concentrating a little more on Donald Trump than the others, since he has the highest chance of being the Republican nominee at this point. And that's why I wanted to show this quick, I think it's a little under a minute. This clip is one of the moderators asking Donald Trump if he also supports putting ground troops in against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It's a follow-up to a question to a previous candidate, which I didn't choose. And you'll see that Donald Trump actually talks about putting tens of thousands of troops on the ground, which is usually the Republicans and the Democrats have agreed that they don't want to put in ground troops, that they want to do, pound them from the air. There was the whole Ted Cruz carpet bombing thing, but even Ted Cruz didn't want to put in the ground troops because that's really unpopular with the American people. And you'll see Donald Trump tries to mitigate it a little by talking about how then we got to come home and rebuild America, but he's still talking about putting in tens of thousands of ground troops in the Middle East. This is really important to take note of over in this clip.
We really have no choice. We have to knock out ISIS. We have to knock the hell out of them. We have to get rid of it, and then we have to come back here and rebuild our country, which is falling apart.
How many are we
have no
speaking
choice.
about?
I would listen to the generals, but I'm hearing numbers of 20 to 30,000. We have to knock them out fast. Look, we're not allowed to fight. We can't fight. We're not knocking out the oil because they don't want to create environmental pollution up in the air. I mean, these are things that nobody even believes. They think we're kidding. They didn't want to knock out the oil because of what it's going to do to the carbon footprint. We don't fight like we used to fight. We used to fight to win. Now we fight for no reason whatsoever. We don't even know what we're doing. So the answer is we have to knock them out. We have to knock them out fast, and we have to get back home, and we have to rebuild our country, which is falling apart.
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Let's turn from current
I don't know. Knock them out fast? Putting in ground troops and knock them out fast seem to be pretty mutually exclusive based on my understanding of the recent history of that region of the world. And Donald Trump used to tout his foreign policy expertise for opposing the Iraq War, and there was even some quote of him opposing the war in Afghanistan, which he disavowed, but now he seems to be a lot more hawkish, and I thought he was going to try to move to the left of Hillary Clinton on the Iraq War, and since she was for it, he was going to be against it if she ends up being the nominee. But from that little exchange, it sounds almost like he's going to go to the right and be much more hawkish, and I mean, supporting ground troops in the 30 or 40, what do you say, 20 or 30,000 ground troops in the fight against ISIS, that's a significant, quagmire level commitment, I think. But I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I want to move on to another debate that was fairly civil. It's on the Cuba policy. I'm not going to show the Ted Cruz part, but I'm going to show Donald Trump try to explain his Cuba policy and make some dumb errors because his understanding is pretty superficial. And of course, Senator Marco Rubio, being the senator from Florida and being of the son of Cuban parents, he's obviously going to know a lot more about the Cuban situation. And you'll see he shows up Donald Trump's lack of knowledge, but doesn't really turn it into any kind of personal attack. Doesn't really even sharpen it into saying specifically that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, but he does kind of point out little flubs that Donald Trump made over in this clip.
You said the concept of opening Cuba is fine. You've said the concept of opening Cuba is fine. Why do you agree with President Obama and disagree with what Senator Rubio just said?
I don't really agree with President Obama. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. What I want a much better deal to be made, because right now Cuba is making, as usual with our country, we don't make good deals. We don't have our right people negotiating. We have people that don't have a clue. As an example, I heard recently where the threat was made that they want reparations for years of abuse by the United States, and nobody's talking about it, and they'll end up signing a deal, and then we'll get sued for $400 billion or $1 trillion. All that stuff has to be agreed to now. We don't want to get sued after the deal is made. So I don't agree with President Obama. I do agree that something should take place. After 50 years, it's enough time, folks. But we have to make a good deal, and we have to get rid of all the litigation that's going to happen. This was just a little story, but it was a big story to me, because they said, oh, here we go. We make a deal, then we get sued for a tremendous amount of money for reparations. So I want to do something, but it's got to be done intelligently. We have to make a good deal.
Senator Rubio, I know you want to get in, but just to be clear, Mr. Trump, are you saying that if you were president, you would continue the diplomatic relations, or would you reverse them? I
would want to make a good deal. I would want to make a strong, solid, good deal, because right now, everything is in Cuba's favor. Right now, everything, every single aspect of this deal is in Cuba's favor. It's the same way as the Iran deal. We never walked, all we do is keep giving. We give and give.
Mr. Trump, just to be clear, there is an embassy that you would have to decide whether it would be open or whether you would close it. Which would it be? In Havana.
I would probably have the embassy closed until such time as a really good deal was made and struck by the United States.
All right, first of all, the embassy is the former consulate. It's the same building, so it could just go back to being called a consulate. We don't have to close it that way. Second of all, I don't know where Cuba's going to sue us, but if they sue us in a court in Miami, they're going to lose. Third, on the issue of a good deal, I know what the good deal is. I'll tell you what the good deal now is already codified. Here's a good deal. Cuba has free elections. Cuba stops putting people in jail for speaking out. Cuba has freedom of the press. Cuba kicks out the Russians from Lourdes and kicks out this Chinese listening station in Behukal. Cuba stops helping North Korea invade UN sanctions. Cuba takes all of those fugitives of American justice, including that cop killer from New Jersey, and send her back to the United States and to jail where she belongs. And you know what? Then we can have a relationship with Cuba. That's a good deal.
Thank you, Senator Rubio. Senator Cruz.
So, like I said, I thought Senator Marco Rubio did a pretty good job at subtly putting digs in on Donald Trump without going into the really nasty personal attacks that seem to have dragged him down. At the same time, it may have dragged Donald Trump down a little bit, but really seemed to have almost backfired when he was going after, the size of his hands and wetting his pants and his makeup and his hair, and that whole thing is gone and didn't seem to have worked well for Marco Rubio. And if he doesn't win his home state of Florida, which at least the current polls say he's not going to, then his whole candidacy may be over. I don't know, maybe he won't drop out, but it seems to me like there's a good chance Marco Rubio will be dropping out of the race next Wednesday when he doesn't win Florida, if that's what actually happens. But I want to move on to another topic that the candidates covered. This is also Marco Rubio, and it's the other clip I have with John Kasich in it, the governor of Ohio. And this, believe it or not, is the Republican candidates talking about man-made climate change. And Marco Rubio, in a part of his first answer that I cut out, Jake Tapper asked him if he would take a pledge that the Republican mayor of Miami asked for the candidates to take, that they agreed with the big consensus of scientists that there is man-made climate change. And you'll see Marco Rubio said that, he believes the climate's always changing, but didn't really go into the whole man-made climate change. And then here's Jake Tapper's follow-up, where Marco Rubio kind of reprises his previous answer, and then it goes over to Ohio Governor John Kasich, who again kind of shows what passes for moderation in the Republican Party on the issue of climate change, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
My family's being raised here. I want this to be a safe and clean place, but these laws some people are asking us to pass will do nothing for the environment, and they will hurt and devastate our economy.
So just to clarify, Senator Rubio, Mayor Regalado, when he talks about the reality of the scientific consensus about climate change, the Republican mayor of Miami, he's saying the scientific consensus is that man does contribute to climate change. When you talk to him, because he is the mayor of Miami and he has endorsed you, you tell him that he's wrong?
I would say to him that there is no law that they want us to pass that would have any impact on that. If you took the gift list of all of these groups that are asking us to pass these laws and did every single one of them, there would be no change in our environment. Sea level would still rise. All these other things that are happening would continue to go on for a lot of different reasons. One, because America is not a planet, it's a country. And number two, because these other countries like India and China are more than making up in carbon emission for whatever we could possibly cut. Here's what he will immediately, Mayor Regalado is a great mayor and a good friend, but here's what he's immediately going to start hearing from. He will immediately start hearing from families in South Florida who are barely making it by, and now their electric bill went up $20 or $30 a month. Because we've just made it more expensive to generate power.
Thank you, Senator.
That cost will be passed on to working families. I am not going to destroy the U.S. economy for a law that will do nothing for our environment.
Governor Kasich, what would you say to the mayor of Miami?
Well, I do believe we contribute to climate change, but I don't think it has to be either you're for some environmental stringent rules or you're not going to have any jobs. The fact is you can have both. In our state, we've reduced emissions by 30%. But let me tell you also what we're trying to do. We want all the sources of energy. We want to dig coal, but we want to clean it when we burn it. We believe in natural gas. We believe in nuclear power. And you know what else I believe in? I happen to believe in solar energy, wind energy, efficiency. Renewables matter. Now, it doesn't mean because you pursue a policy of being sensitive to the environment, because we don't know how much humans actually contribute, but it is important we develop renewables. A battery technology can unleash an entirely different world. So the fact is that you can have a strong environmental policy at the same time that you have strong economic growth. They are not inconsistent with one another.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Cruz, I want a little...
So that's my second Governor John Kasich of Ohio clip. And as you saw, that's what passes for moderation in the Republican Party when it comes to the issue of climate change, where he is willing to cut emissions, but only in ways that don't hurt the coal industry and don't really hurt anyone economically. But he thinks that there are ways to profit from clean energy, which at least is farther than Senator Marco Rubio there, who wouldn't really admit that man-made climate change existed. And he was he was using those old Republican talking points about how the United States, what was his big soundbite line there, that America is not a planet, it's a country, and there are all these other developing countries, China and India aren't going to cut their emissions. Well, that doesn't take into account what they came up with in Paris, where there actually was, there weren't actual enforcement, but there were guidelines that, it was the best they could come up with. And if that did actually happen, there were goals that both China and India were supposed to meet. So that old Republican talking point is not very accurate, but Marco Rubio is still sticking with it, even though Miami, if in the beginning of the clip that I didn't show, they actually had a graphic of how Florida was going to lose a whole bunch of its coastline if the sea level rises as much as it's supposed to before the end of the century, and Marco Rubio wasn't having any of it. But I wanted to show at least that the Republicans talked about it, and Ohio Governor John Kasich is as far left as they go on climate change in the Republican Party, at least for national presidential candidates, I guess. And the next topic I want to show is a shorter clip. It's just of Donald Trump again. I wanted to show him responding to some of the criticisms of him as authoritarian, or praising authoritarians. This is Jake Tapper pointing out some of his past quotes, saying that the Chinese government was strong when they put down Tiananmen Square, and some, strong praise were, some quotes that kind of praise Vladimir Putin for being strong. And Donald Trump says, even though he's always saying how strong he is and how strong he's going to be, all of a sudden, when it comes to those quotes, strength doesn't necessarily mean that they were good. And to be fair to him, in the Tiananmen Square quote that Jake Tapper reads, he did say that they were horrible and vicious. So I'll talk about that a little more if you watch that 90-second exchange over here.
Some of your Republican critics have expressed concern about comments you have made praising authoritarian dictators. You have said positive things about Putin as a leader and about China's massacre of pro-democracy protesters at Tiananmen Square. You said, quote, "When the students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. Then they were vicious, they were horrible, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength." How do you respond
to that? Doesn't mean I was endorsing that. I was not endorsing it. I said that is a strong, powerful government that put it down with strength, and then they kept down the riot. It was a horrible thing. It doesn't mean at all I was endorsing it. As far as Putin is concerned, I think Putin's been a very strong leader for Russia, but he's been a lot stronger than our leader, that I can tell you. I mean, for Russia. That doesn't mean I'm endorsing Putin.
But the word strong, obviously, is a compliment. And many people would look at what the Chinese leaders have done and what Putin is doing as atrocities.
I used to think Merkel was a great leader until she did what she did to Germany. Germany is a disaster right now. So I used to think that. And strong doesn't mean good. Putin is a strong leader, absolutely. I could name many strong leaders. I could name very many very weak leaders. But he is a strong leader. Now, I don't say that in a good way or a bad way. I say it as a fact.
Governor Kasich, when you were a member of Congress, you were out.
So that's Donald Trump not really backing down from his previous comments that seemed to praise the Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government for putting down the protesters in Tiananmen Square, or at least the strength of the government. Same with Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump all of a sudden seems to want to be nuanced in interpreting his previous quotes, but that's, I guess, one of the magical things about Donald Trump is that whenever he says anything, he kind of like backtracks a little and obfuscates a little, so you can never quite pin down exactly what he meant, although sometimes he says things really outrageous, like, Islam hates us, and then later he'll sort of backtrack and try to make it sound like he wasn't saying what he meant, or what it sounds like he meant. But I wanted to at least show that clip where he talked about how strong doesn't necessarily mean good, even though he's always talking about how strong he is. And I want to go on to one more clip that shows a really important issue that I thought Jake Tapper brought up. And it also shows Senator Ted Cruz getting another subtle dig in on Donald Trump without really attacking him personally. This is about the violence at Donald Trump's rallies. I've watched video. There was an incident, I think it was yesterday or the day before. I think it was in North Carolina where Donald Trump had a rally, and a 78-year-old man went up and elbowed some protester in the face as he was being led out by the cops. And the cops didn't arrest the guy at the time, and they actually kind of threw the victim to the ground and frisked him, if you watch the whole video. And I'm not showing that video, but and later they have a little interview with the 78-year-old who said, if he could have been anyone, he could have been a terrorist. If he comes back, maybe we'll have to kill him. And they eventually arrested the 78-year-old who attacked this African-American protester at a Trump rally. And here's Donald Trump being asked about that by Jake Tapper and about the violence at his rallies. And he claims that some of the protesters at his rallies, and he specifically talks about a rally in Las Vegas where he said, "I wish I could punch that guy in the face." He says that the protesters are violent, and I put a link down in the video description to a Politico article about that Las Vegas rally where the security guard, an unnamed security guard, actually says that the protester wasn't violent at all and contradicts what Donald Trump says in this clip. And then, like I said, at the end, Ted Cruz actually takes a dig at Donald Trump and the right hand raised pledges at some of his rallies that are kind of disturbing, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Republican presidential debate in Miami, Florida. Mr. Trump, I want to start with you in this block. Earlier today, a man was arrested and charged with assault after sucker punching a protester in the face at your rally in Fayetteville, North Carolina. This is hardly the first incident of violence breaking out at one of your rallies. Today, Hillary Clinton, your potential general election opponent, clearly indicated she sees this as an issue for the campaign. She said, quote, "This kind of behavior is repugnant. We set the tone for our campaigns. We should encourage respect, not violence." Do you believe that you've done anything to create a tone where this kind of violence would be encouraged?
I hope not. I truly hope not. I will say this. We have 30,000 people. You've seen it yourself. People come with tremendous passion and love for the country. And when they see protest, in some cases, you know, you're mentioning one case, which I haven't seen. I heard about it, which I don't like. But when they see what's going on in this country, they have anger that's unbelievable. They have anger. They love this country. They don't like seeing bad trade deals. They don't like seeing higher taxes. They don't like seeing a loss of their jobs, where our jobs have just been devastated. And I know, I mean, I see it. There is some anger. There's also great love for the country. It's a beautiful thing in many respects, but I certainly do not condone that at all, Jake.
Some of your critics point to quotes that you've made at these rallies, including February 23rd, "I'd like to punch him in the face," referring to a protester. February 27th, in the good old days, they'd have ripped him out of that seat so fast. February 1st, "Knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously, okay, just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise, I promise."
We have some protesters who are bad dudes. They have done bad things. They are swinging. They are really dangerous. And they get in there and they start hitting people. And we had a couple big, strong, powerful guys doing damage to people. Not only the loudness I don't mind, but doing serious damage. And if they're going to be taken out, I be honest, I mean, we have to run something. And it's not me. It's usually the municipal government, the police, because I don't have guards all over these stadiums. I mean, we fill up stadiums. It's usually the police. And by the way, speaking of the police, we should pay our respects to the police, because they are taking tremendous abuse of this country, and they do a phenomenal job. So we should truly give our police, they're incredible people, we should give them a great deal more respect than they receive.
Senator Cruz, are you concerned at all that these kinds of scenes potentially hurt the Republican Party for the general election?
Listen, I think for every one of us, we need to show respect to the people. We need to remember who it is we're working for. We've seen for 7 years a president who believes he's above the law, who behaves like an emperor, who it is all about him, and he forgot that he's working for the American people. I mean, let me ask, turn the camera out here. How many of y'all feel disrespected by Washington? Washington isn't listening to the people. And that's the frustration that is boiling over. And we need to nominate and elect a president who remembers he works for the people. You know, at Donald's rallies recently, he's taken to asking people in the crowd to raise their hand and pledge their support to him. Now, I got to say, to me, I think that's exactly backwards. This is a job interview. We are here pledging our support to you, not the other way around. And the only hand-raising that I'm interested in doing is on January 20th, 2017, raising my hand with my left hand on the Bible and pledging to the American people to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Mr. Trump, if you'd like to respond.
It shows the total dishonesty of the press. We were having, on a few occasions, again, massive crowds, and we're talking, and I'm saying, who's going to vote on Tuesday? Who's going to vote? The place goes crazy. Then I say, hey, do me a favor. Raise your right hand. Do you swear you're going to vote for Donald Trump? Everyone's laughing. We're all having a good time. And, you know, that's why I have much bigger crowds than Ted, because we have a good time at my crowd. But we're all having a good time. And the next day on the Today Show, and a couple of other places, not too many, because when you look at it, everyone's smiling, laughing, their arms are raised like this. They had pictures, still pictures, of people and they tried to equate it to Nazi Germany. It is a disgrace. It was a total disgrace. And I've had reporters, people that you know, come up to me and said that what they did on the Today Show was a disgrace.
Governor Kasich.
So, I don't know. I think that Donald Trump was pretty despicable when he was blaming the victim there for getting punched in the face, or he also was saying how the protesters were all violent, but I've never heard of anyone being charged, and somehow I think with the way the police are, if the protesters were actually violent, we would have heard of people being charged for assault if they're swinging at the people in the crowd. I haven't seen anything like that. And like I said, I put a link down in the video description to the Politico article about the Las Vegas event. That's the one where he said, I wish I could punch that guy in the face. And he said in a subsequent news conference that that's the one where he saw some big strong guy wildly swinging at people in the crowd. And you'll see the security guard in the Politico article says that's not what happened. That there was no violence from the protesters, and most protesters, I know a lot of Black Lives Matter activists and other protesters who are involved in these types of incidents, and the people I know, they're nonviolent protesters. That's part of the whole protest movement. So for some reason, I don't necessarily believe Donald Trump on that issue. I have just a couple more clips. This next one is also Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. Oh, before I get to the next clip, though, I like the way that Ted Cruz talked about the raising the right hand and the rallies, and you could see Donald Trump could hear what he was criticizing him for, but he didn't really take the bait. He didn't go after Ted Cruz. He went after the media for sensationalizing the fact that he's having people at his rallies raise their right hand in what looks eerily like a Hitler salute, even though he says it's all joking and all in fun. But some of us don't really find the Nazi salute that funny. Sorry there, Donald. But the second to last clip I want to show is another discussion between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. They're really the only two candidates who could get a majority of the delegates before they get to the convention at this point, because they're both pretty close. They're within 100 delegates of each other. Even if Senator Marco Rubio won Florida, which it doesn't look like he's going to do, he could only win at a contested convention at this point. And the same is true of Ohio Governor John Kasich. And here's Ted Cruz explaining how he's one of the only two, and so he's also the only one who can beat Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump's response in this clip, a little over 90 seconds over here.
Very, very hard, but Donald is right. There are only two of us that have a path to winning the nomination, Donald and myself. At this point, I have roughly 360 delegates. He has about 100 more than I have. We have at this point beaten Donald in 8 separate states all over the country, geographically, from Maine to Alaska, from Kansas to Texas, all over this country. We have beaten him. And so for the people at home, if you're one of the 65–70% of Republicans who recognizes that if we nominate Donald Trump, Hillary wins. That's why the media wants him to be the nominee so much. If you recognize that, then I want to invite you, if you've supported other candidates, come and join us. We are seeing candidates coming together and uniting. It's why Carly Fiorina endorsed me yesterday. It's why Mike Lee endorsed me today. I ask everyone to come together. Let's stand together and let's beat Hillary Clinton in November.
Thank you, Mr. Trump, then to Senator Rubio.
You know, I listen and I watch Ted on television and when he speaks, and he's always saying, I'm the only one that beat Donald in 6 contests, and I beat him. But I beat him in 13 contests. He never mentions that. And let me just tell you another little minor fact. I have about 1,600,000 votes during this primary season, more votes than Ted. The other thing is, I beat Hillary, and I will give you the list. I beat Hillary in many of the polls that have been taken, and each week I get better and better, and believe me, I haven't even started on her yet.
Senator Rubio.
So I'm not going to show the Senator Marco Rubio part because, like I said, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, they're the two who are the only ones who have a path to get the nomination without going to a contested convention and ending up taking some of someone else's delegates. And that will even become more clear next Tuesday in the mini Super Tuesday contests, including Florida and Ohio. And that will basically determine, well, not completely, but could, depending on how it turns out, could determine whether Donald Trump will have enough delegates when he gets to the convention, or whether it's going to be some kind of contested convention, or then there's also this low probability outcome where Ted Cruz all of a sudden has a surge and he gets enough delegates. But I don't think that's going to happen. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And I only have one more clip I want to show, and I picked this one out because it's actually really important, a really important fact about Donald Trump. You know how Donald Trump is always talking about how he's self-funding his campaign, and so he's not beholden to the same special interests that all the other candidates are. Well, one of the conservative Washington Times reporter asked Donald Trump a question near the end of the debate. This is my last clip, about whether he will pledge to also self-fund his campaign in the general election. And it's really important because if you look down in the video description, I put a link to a Slate magazine article talking about how Donald Trump does not have the cash to really do a good job self-funding a general election campaign. He only has about $300 million cash. Most of his money's in real estate, or the Trump brand is worth like over $1 billion apparently from his financials. But $300 million, and if he spent all of his cash, that's still, in modern political campaigns, that's not enough to really self-fund. And you'll see he doesn't pledge to self-fund his campaign, and then he spends a bunch of time talking about how great it is that he's self-funding his campaign and how important it is. But keep in mind, he may not be a self-funded campaign by the time he gets to the general election, as I will discuss just a little more after you watch that last 90-second clip over here.
Mr. Trump, one of your biggest selling points is that you are largely self-funding your campaign.
Yes.
And you argue your opponents are controlled by their special interest donors. Will you maintain your pledge not to take outside contributions throughout the general election?
I have not made that decision yet. I will make a decision on that, but I have not made that decision yet. My decision was that I would go through the entire primary season, and I have turned down probably $275 million worth. I have many, many friends that come up all day long. 5 million, 10 million. I'm turning down money. I feel sort of foolish, to be honest with you. I don't know if I get any credit for it, but I'm self-funding my campaign. And and by the way, other than very small donations where people are sending in $200, $15, $20, and we have some of that, but it's not a large amount. No, I'm self-funding my campaign. And the reason is that I've been in this business a long time, and I was on the other side until 8 months ago. I was on the other side. I made massive contributions, large contributions to politicians, both Democrats and Republicans. I was liked by everybody, which is an important thing. I will say this. People control special interests, lobbyists, donors. They make large contributions to politicians, and they have total control over those politicians. I don't want anybody to control me but the people right out there. And I'm going to do the right thing.
Senator Cruz, I want to come.
So you can see there Donald Trump extolling the virtues of being a self-funded campaign, even though he wouldn't promise to self-fund his general election campaign, and he basically doesn't have enough money to self-fund his general election campaign, according to the Slate magazine article, as I mentioned before the clip. You can see down in the video description. And that's the final clip from the Republican debate on CNN I wanted to show you from last night. I hope you enjoyed the 14 clips I picked out for you. As of the time I started this broadcast, YouTube had put the monetization of this video under review because it might be too sensitive to be advertiser friendly. And I think it's because in the video description of this debate, I talked about ISIS and terrorism. A lot of the topics had to do with Islam and ISIS and terrorism, and that threw off the YouTube algorithm, and I don't know if it will be monetized. Last night's video isn't monetized because the Univision CNN Democratic debate from Miami is not monetized because of a Univision claim on the debate. So if you want to help me keep making these videos and picking out these clips and giving you my media criticism and political analysis along with the clips to make it into a fair use video, if you want to help me do that, over in the little left-hand corner here, you can hover your mouse and find a link to YouTube fan funding. If you give a direct contribution to my channel, that helps out. Someone actually gave me a $50 contribution a few days ago, which I really appreciate. And then down in the video description, you'll find a link to my Patreon page. I have almost 70 patrons who donate over $400 a month. That really helps defray the liability I get from the copyright claims and from all these other problems with YouTube giving me advertising income anymore. So it keeps it me close to almost minimum wage for the work I do on my videos. So if you can help me out that way, I appreciate it. If you can help me out just by giving me a thumbs up or adding a comment or sharing the video around the internet, I appreciate that, just by supporting the channel in any way you can. And I try to keep supporting you, my viewers, by keeping you informed, picking out the best clips from the corporate media debates, and I will also have my best clips from the corporate media news analysis shows on Sunday morning, this Sunday afternoon or evening, probably around 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific, which will be Greenwich Mean Time minus 7 hours, because Europe hasn't caught up to American daylight savings, which starts this Sunday. And I may even have a new edited, produced video on feminism to announce. I'll have to see how much of that I can get done tomorrow, because I have several hours possibly to work on it on my Saturday. Or maybe I'll just take a little time off after these 2 unmonetized debates that I spent all this time on the last 2 days. But in any case, I will be putting up a Sunday live clip roundup sometime Sunday evening, my time here in California. And until I get my next thing up, whatever it may be, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet. Okay, Sandy.